Hey everyone, Ralph here. In this video, I'm going to teach you how you can build your own ChatGPT plugin running in the cloud in just 20 minutes. And don't worry, we'll be using a free hosted cloud service, so there's a very little infrastructure or setup required. We'll just focus on building the plugin logic. The plugin is going to be a very simple to-do app that allows us to read, write, and delete to-dos from the database in our cloud service. All of the resources and code that I'll be using is available in a link in the description. So it's going to be super easy for you to follow along and build this plugin. And I'll promise you in 20 minutes, you will have your first ChatGPT plugin that you can learn from and extend. But enough talking, let's get into building. Let's go. So to build our plugin, we're going to be using a service called Gadget. You can find it at gadget.dev, and the TLDR is really that it's the fastest way to build web apps. With Gadget, you get a fully hosted backend and frontend running in the cloud at all times. You get a development environment, a production environment, a hosted database. You get a node runtime environment and a lot of other things that we won't have time to go through today. If you want to learn more on gadget.dev, you can open up the docs and you can check what is Gadget here. It has a great overview, and then you can dig into docs to figure out what Gadget is and what you can do with it. It's free to sign up. You can sign up for free right here. I naturally have an account, so I'm just going to go ahead and click log in. And then here, I'm going to go ahead and click new app. If you're new to Gadget, at the end of the sign up flow, you should see this screen. And what Gadget is asking for here is just to name your project. I'm going to name mine ChatGPT plugin. It just needs to be something that is unique across all Gadget apps. And the reason is pretty simple. Gadget gives your app a unique URL that is live on the internet. In my case, I get this gadget-plugin.gadget.app, and this is now live on the internet. I can do network calls to it. And if you remember, I said we get both a development and production environment. So we have both of those URLs right here, and I'll show you those in a minute. Then we have our hosted database. We have files that powers our front end and our back end. We have a package.json in case we want to use packages, node packages. We're not going to do that today. And then we have a lot of other goodies that we won't be using. And just to sort of hammer home the point here, this is not running in a local environment somewhere. This is running in the cloud. We have this running for you. And this is essentially a front end of our production environment. And if we want to use, we can use the development environment. And this uses just -- development. So if we add -- development here, we access the front end of our development environment. And it's really easy to deploy from the development environment to the production environment by simply clicking the deploy button here. It takes a few seconds, and we're just copying over your code and everything that you set up in the development environment to production. You don't have to worry about any dependencies, etc., that might happen when you code in local and deploy to production in the cloud. In this tutorial, we're only going to be using our development environment, but if you read our docs, you can see that it's really easy to set your app up to be used in production. But enough about that. Let's get into actually building our plugin. So all of the code, all of the resources that I'm using is linked in the video description. One example here is that we got OpenAI's documentation for how to build plugins. And in there, we will learn that there's two things or two files that we need to create. One is this plugin manifest that just provide a description of what the plugin is, where it lives, or where the API spec live rather, and some other information. And then the second file that we need to create is this OpenAPI definition, which is essentially the schema and description of our API that ChatGPT reads to understand what is this, is it that I can do, where do I need to send my request, what data should I send, what do I expect back. So let's go ahead and create those two. Let's start with the plugin manifest. I'm going to go and just copy the ai-plugin.json name here. And what we want to do in Gadget is to create two static files that have these JSON structures in them. The way to do that is here in the Gadget editor, you have this file structure. I'm going to go ahead and add a folder in the root. I'm going to call it public. And you need to call it public too, so this is not optional. And then we right click on the public folder and add another folder, and this is the folder that OpenAI requires us to name well-known. And in this folder, we're going to create a new file by right clicking the folder, click new file, and this is what we'll name ai-plugin.json. Just hit enter and we get a file here. Now, all of the code files or static files that you create in Gadget, you can use your web editor right here. But if you're someone that prefers to use your local code editor, VS Code, Sublime, whatever you use, down here you have a command that you can run on your local machine that sets up the Gadget CLI and a file sync that allows you to sync files from Gadget to your local machine, from your local machine to Gadget in real time. So whenever you make edits, you create files, folders, etc., that is synced to Gadget in real time, and the other way around as well. For this tutorial, I'm just going to use our web editor here to make it simple. And I'm going to copy this file right here and then just paste it into Gadget right here. We can maybe change the name here and say our to-do plugin tutorial. We can leave all of these other things the way that they are, but one thing that we need to change is this URL. We're not using localhost, we're using our Gadget app. So I'm just going to copy this URL from my browser, and then I'll replace this. And because we're using our development environment, we got to remember to add -- development, because we won't be deploying these files to production during the tutorial. So we need to use our development environment. And then I'm going to change this OpenAPI YAML file to be a JSON file. And the last thing that I'll do in here that is optional is that I want a neat logo. And for me, that is going to be a Gadget logo. You can find whichever logo that you want, and I'm not going to care about these other things. Okay, so now we have that one, and then what we need next is this OpenAPI definition. And I'm not going to be copying this. I'll be using something that I've edited myself, but it needs to live in the public folder. So let's right click the public folder, click new file. And then here we'll just call this OpenAPI.json. And it's important, remember to name it OpenAPI with a P, not OpenAI.json. Common mistake, because if you name it something else, it won't work. Then I copy paste something here, and this again exists. You can find this in the video description. And this is really the API specification that ChatGPT will read to understand what is this plugin doing, what do I call out to, which is our URL right here, and what are the things that I can do. And these exist under paths. So we're providing paths under a folder called to-dos. There we have a get, we have a post, and we have a, where did it go? Put method. And it just tells ChatGPT, if you call this get, you can get a list of to-dos by providing these parameters. If you do a post, you can add a to-do list. Here are the parameters that we expect. And here's a put, provide these parameters, and here is the information that you should expect to get back. So it's pretty simple, and just sort of like make sure that you understand with Gadget, as soon as you add a file, you create a file, you update a file, it is available instantaneously on the internet. So if we go to our development environment here, and we go to this well-known AI plugin file that we created a few seconds ago, This exists right here. The moment that we created it is available on the internet on this URL. So we're actually ready now to just go ahead and install this plugin in ChatGPT. So I'm going to copy this URL to our app, which is just this and the -- development. We'll go to ChatGPT, click New Chat, click GPT-4, click plugins. I don't have any plugins enabled, so let's click that, and then there is this plugin store option. Now you need to have a ChatGPT account that has the plugin development or developer preview available. It's not available to everyone. It's in an alpha or beta. The way that you know that you have it is that you've received an email and you have this option to develop your own plugin. If you don't have this, you won't be able to complete this tutorial. So let's go ahead and click that. And here ChatGPT provides or asks you, what's the domain of your plugin? And that's just going to be our app domain with the development setting here. And then we can just click manifest file or find manifest file. Because we've created that and it's available, ChatGPT finds it and says, hey, our to-do plugin tutorial. Great. Then we get a series of questions that we're just going to click through. Next, ready to install? Yes, install it for me. It's unverified. I'm okay with that. And you want to install it? Yes, I want to install it. And that's it. We have installed a plugin from or on ChatGPT. We haven't set up all of the logic in the backend, but we can actually call our backend just to see what happens. So I'm just going to say, this is Ralph. What are my to-dos? And again, we expect this to fail because we haven't set up the logic, but ChatGPT has the endpoints. It understands where it needs to send a request. It does that, and let's see what the response is here. So we can see that it sends username Ralph, and then the response that it gets back is just an HTML page, and that's because we haven't created our endpoints, and Gadget is just going to provide a HTML page instead. But let's go ahead and create the logic in the backend that allows us to create, read, and delete these to-dos. And what we're going to be doing in Gadget is that I want to store the to-dos in our local database. So the way that we're going to do that is that we're going to create a model or a database table, a few fields, and we'll store the records in there. The way to do that in Gadget is here under data models, you have a plus sign. Let's click that to add a model. You can think about this as a table in your Postgres database. And we're going to name this to do. And then in here, we have a bunch of options. These represent the create, update, and delete API endpoints that we automatically generate for any model that you create in a Gadget app. So we're going to be calling these APIs to create and delete records, but we need to add fields as well. You can see we have an ID created at and updated at system fields out of the box, but we want to add a few more fields. So let's click this plus button here, and let's call this a task. If you want to change the type of the field, you can do that here, but we'll just keep it as a string. We'll add validation to say that it is required. And then let's add a second field. We'll call that username. We'll make that a string as well and just add required. There's a bunch of other cool stuff that you can do in here in Gadget, but I'm gonna skip that for this tutorial because it's not something that you need. But if you wanted, you could add essentially serverless function that runs whenever something gets called or created here, but we'll skip that. But it's a really cool feature that you get out of the box with Gadget. So now we have a model, we can store our data. Let's go ahead and add the first route that allows ChatGPT to create a record or create a to-do. And the way that we're going to do that is that we're going to go to routes here. And if you remember, in the routes folder, we expect ChatGPT to send requests to a to-dos folder or path, sorry. So let's add a new folder under the routes. Let's call it to-dos. And in here, we're going to add a new file. And this is going to be our post route. So let's name it post-colon.js. It gotta be .js, otherwise it doesn't work. And here we can see we get a default file. I'm gonna remove this stuff at the top, and then we're gonna add all of our code inside this module exports that have access to the request, the reply. We can call APIs to our local data models here, because any data model that you create in Gadget get APIs auto-generated and documented out of the box for you. We got access to our loggers and also connections to platforms such as Shopify and other things. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to code this together with you, and then the two other routes to put and get, we're just going to copy paste. So what I'm going to do here is start with const capturing the body. Comes from the request, and then we're going to do const username equals request.query.username, and that's something that ChatGPT sends to us. You can see that here, it's the username right here. And then the way that I've set this up is just if username equals user, which is the default that ChatGPT will send if you're not saying who you are. It's going to do reply.send. The user needs to identify themselves. Please ask what their username is. Ideally, you would add auth to your app to make sure that users auth, but that's beyond the scope of this tutorial. So this is just a neat way of being able to store to-dos for different people or for different tasks, as an example. Then we'll add the else statement, and then we're going to add a try here. And now we essentially want to store the to-do that ChatGPT sends us in our to-do model that we just created. And the way to do that is that we'll do a const to-do record. Then we're going to do an await. And then we're going to do API.todo, which is calling this to-do model. And then we're going to do the create method. And then in here, we're just going to go ahead and add the logic for what we want to create in this to-do. We want to add a task that comes into the via the body to-do, which ChatGPT sends to us. And then the username that we want to add as well. It is just the username that we're capturing right here. And then I'm just going to throw a little bit of a logger.info here, where we'll just do the to-do record and say, hey, created this record. And this is just to show you how you can sort of use the logs that we have in Gadget to debug in case that you want. And then we need to tell ChatGPT that, hey, this went great. So we do a reply send, and then we'll just say, I've added a to-do, and then we'll just, yes, let's do this. We'll do body.todo. You could also use the to-do record here to show what's actually added to the database, to the list for username. Let's do this. That's what we're meant to do, username. So that responds back to ChatGPT saying, hey, I've added this. And then we want to do a catch and just reply.send, oops, something didn't work, could not add a task, or the task maybe, the to-do is the correct word. So this is our route, and again, Gadget, you don't have to save, you don't have to deploy. This is now ready for us to use. So let's go ahead and just go to ChatGPT and say like, hey, please add a to-do to create a tutorial. And now ChatGPT is going to call out to our newly created endpoint, and we're going to store that information in there. So we can see that it sent this username Ralph to do create a tutorial, and we get this response back that we just defined minutes ago. So if in Gadget, if we go to our data models, click to do, click data, we can see that we have this record right here. ID 1, created right now, task to create a tutorial for username Ralph. Cool. So that worked. Now let's add the 2 remaining routes here. So in our to-do folder, we just got to add a new file. Let's do the get dash colon, and let's remember to add .js and not just JS this time. And I'm going to copy paste this right here. Again, it's available in the video description, and it's just to speed this up a little bit. So we're again fetching the username, doing this a little bit of a check that you don't need if you don't want it. And then because we're now fetching records, not adding, our API call to this to-do data model is find many rather than create. And we're just doing a select here where we're fetching the ID and the task. And here we're adding a filter. We're just saying only get me records that the username is equals to the username that we're passing in. Doing a little bit of a logger, and then there might not be any records. So we got to make sure that we handle if there are no to-dos in our list. So I have a little if statement that checks if the length of what we're getting back here is greater than 0. And if it is, we're just going to be formatting these records in a way that we can send it back to ChatGPT in a way that it can use it. And then we're just reply.send that. And if there aren't any records, we're just responding back with there are no to-dos. Do you want to add one? And then lastly, let's add the last route, which is a put, and it's be a similar pattern: put dash dot push dash colon dot JS, and then again I'm going to copy paste this, and this is a very simple route. So we're fetching the body from the request. We don't have to check the user here. The reason is that when you're asking for a list of to-dos, you get the record ID from the database, and that record ID is what ChatGPT is going to send back whenever you say, hey, delete this specific record. So to know that, ChatGPT needs to have the ID, and to get that ID, it needs to have fetched it for a particular user. So what we're doing here is just await. We're using the API to go to our to-do model, and here we're just using the delete method. Then we're passing in this to-do ID that we get from ChatGPT as a string, and just say it was successfully deleted, do a little bit of a logger, and if there's an error, we just said there was an error. So that's all. We actually now have built all of our ChatGPT plugin is ready to use. So let's go ahead and try a couple of more things. Let's look at this. Let's add another to-do to edit my tutorial. Then let me know what my sorry about that, was an alarm. Let me know what my remaining to-dos are. So here it's sequencing 2 things. It adds a tutorial, or sorry, it adds a to-do, and then it checks what the to-dos are. So we can look at what that looks like. So here it says add this to-do. It's similar to what we did previously. And then we're using the get method for username Ralph. And here you can see the structure that we created. ID1 task to create a tutorial. ID2 task to edit my tutorial. So what we can do now is to say, I've completed my task to create a tutorial. Let me know, or we can also do this. Let's also add another task to publish my tutorial to YouTube. Then let me know what my remaining tasks are. So what it's going to do here is 3 things. It's going to remove a to-do, it's going to add a to-do, and then it's going to go and fetch what the to-dos are. So we're essentially using all of the 3 methods that we've created. And if we check our data model here, we can see that we have only 2 here: to edit my tutorial, to publish my tutorial to YouTube, because we removed the first one. So that's really all that you need to do to create your very own ChatGPT plugin. Is really, really simple once you get a hang of it. It is a bit of a silly example, but it's really just to show you the basics. I think with this, you can now figure out how you need to change that OpenAPI JSON to meet your needs and have an API that meets whatever you want to build. and to update the routes to serve whatever purpose that you have. Because Gadget has Node.js, you can include packages and essentially do anything in those routes. You can call out the third-party APIs, you can do a lot of computation, you can also add more complicated models and store state, etc. I hope that this was useful to you. I hope you are inspired to build some plugins. I would love to know what you end up building, so do leave a comment on the video to let me know what that is. And if the video was helpful for you, please give it a thumbs up. And if you want, also subscribe to this video. It would mean a lot to me. But I'll leave it at that. Thank you so much for watching, and maybe I'll see you in a future tutorial. Bye.